What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video we are looking at the Brooks HYPERION Max 2. And if you're already a fan of the Brooks HYPERION, I know a lot of you are, it was actually one of my favorite shoes of last year. I need you to forget everything you know about that shoe, because the Brooks HYPERION Max 2 is nothing like the Brooks HYPERION. Let's get into it. Okay, let's get started with those disclosures. This video is in collaboration with my friends over at Roadrunner Sports. Roadrunner Sports was good enough to send me this pair of the Brooks HYPERION Max 2 for the purpose of review. However, they haven't told me what to say, they don't have any editorial privileges, and all the thoughts and opinions are my own. With that said, you can pick up a pair of the Brooks HYPERION Max 2 from Roadrunner Sports for $180. And of course, I'll place links in the show notes below in case you want to pick up a pair for yourself. Now, look, I suppose saying that the HYPERION Max 2 is nothing like the HYPERION Max is a little sensational, but I'm not joking, they have made so many changes that if they wanted to rename this shoe something totally different, no one would really know. So let's get started with some specs. The Brooks HYPERION Max 2 has 36 1/4 in the heel, 30 1/4 in the forefoot for a 6mm drop. Now, for those of you wondering, that is the full stack height. I know a lot of time Brooks only provides a stack height that does not include the insert or the outsole rubber, but those stack heights that I just provided, those are everything. And I guess we'll start right at the beginning, telling you the difference between the HYPERION Max and the HYPERION Max 2. In fact, let me just pull out my prop of the HYPERION Max, because the HYPERION Max 2 has an additional 4mm of stack in the heel, 6mm of stack in the forefoot over the original HYPERION Max. So the original HYPERION was really 32-24, a relatively low stack shoe, and the mathematically inclined will have noticed that the HYPERION Max was an 8mm drop, where the HYPERION Max 2 has now reduced the drop to 6mm. It's going to be a welcome change to some, not so welcome to others. Personally, I like the 6mm drop, feels really good in the HYPERION Max 2. Now let's talk about weight, because the HYPERION Max 2 is no longer as light as it was last year. Right? That's not really a big deal because it is a different shoe. But Brooks claims that in the US men's size 9, the HYPERION Max 2 will tip the scale at 9.1 ounces or 258 grams. However, in my size, a US men's size 13, it tips the scale at 11.1 ounces or 315 grams. Now, because we're talking about weight and I want to talk about competitive shoes from a weight perspective, I do just want to jump ahead a little bit and tell you that there is a plastic plate in the HYPERION Max 2. There wasn't one last year. So we've gone from a non-plated trainer to a plated trainer. And ultimately that means that Brooks has entered a very competitive space. Right? There are a lot of popular shoes that now compete directly with the HYPERION Max 2. So first up, we have the Boston 12 weighing in at 312 grams compared to the 315 in my size. Next, we have the Mark X also weighing in at 312 grams in my size. So both the Mark X and the Boston 12 are 3 grams lighter than the HYPERION Max 2. That's really not a big deal. But then we've got the Tier Valkyrie Speedworks, which weighs in at 286 grams. And then finally, we have the Saucony Endorphin Speed 4, which weighs in at 294 grams. So all that to say that there's a lot of competition if you're thinking about buying the HYPERION Max 2. It's very competitive with some other shoes that are in the same space, and yet a little bit heavier than some of the lightest competitors. But let's start at the top as we do, we'll work our way down. Brooks has got a nicely padded heel collar. Now it looks kind of traditional when you're looking down from the top, but it really is a bolster. So when you put your heel into the HYPERION Max 2, it feels really good. It gives your heel a good squeeze. The heel counter is semi-rigid. In fact, I can almost press it down. You know what? It's pretty rigid. Like, it's not rock solid, but it's hard for me to press down. Either way, it didn't have any heel slip in the HYPERION Max 2. Brooks is using an engineered mesh upper. It provides a good amount of room in the toe box, but overall gives me a very good fit. I think Brooks did well with the upper on this. It's also very breathable. There are minimal overlays. We've got the Brooks logo here on the lateral side, Brooks spelled out on the medial side. There's an underlay coming around the toe box, little overlay here on the heel, some reinforcement coming along the eyelet chain. Oh, and while we're talking about the eyelet chain, Brooks is also including these locking laces with the HYPERION Max 2, which I absolutely love. There's no way that these shoes are coming untied. Now, something else that contributes to that great lock-in feel is the tongue. Now, the tongue is a knit material. It's very thin. There's almost no additional padding on this tongue. There is no lace loop holding it in place, but the tongue is fully gusseted, so it's gusseted on both sides. But here's the thing about the gusset. It's very tight. In fact, it's probably one of the tightest gussets that I've experienced on any running shoe. Like, this tongue is going nowhere, and when your foot goes in, it just feels really good and secure. You know, sometimes those gussets are like almost blowing in the wind. They're just a little too long. Not so with the HYPERION Max 2. The gussets are fairly tight and they do kind of act as bands coming around your midfoot. It's a nice feel. Now, a huge upgrade over the first HYPERION Max is the midsole. Brooks is now using their premium DNA Flash V2. That's the same midsole that they're using in the HYPERION Elite 4, and it's really nice. It's soft, it's responsive, it gives a really sweet ride. Now, sandwiched in between this big chunk of DNA Flash V2 is Brooks Speedbolt plate. Again, it's a plastic plate. We saved those carbon plates for the race day shoes, so we put something a little more flexible in the training shoes. And speaking of flexibility, it's It's fairly flexible, but even though, yeah, I am bending this shoe up quite easily, the Hyperion Max 2 still provides a good pop, but we'll get to the ride in just a second. Now, Brooks is also using their rapid roll technology. Basically, that's their geometry. If we look on the back, we have a nice solid heel bevel, nice toe spring here, and ultimately that is just going to work with the speed vault plate to actively assist the heel to toe transitions. And even though that's just marketing speak, that's how it feels. The geometry and the plate, they work well together. And if we come down to the outsole, we can see we have a good amount of outsole rubber, and it's fairly thick, which I think is a good thing because the shoe is going to last a long time. Like, you're not going to wear through this rubber very quickly. I do see a little bit of wear on my lateral heel edge, but it's actually surprising how little I'm seeing. And then of course we got that cutout in the middle where we can see the speed vault plate. Okay, so what about ride? And here's the thing. Last year, I really liked the Hyperion Max, and that's because it wasn't plated. It was a nice, almost traditional feel when I was on the run. Okay, that feeling has totally gone with the Hyperion Max 2. Instead, Brooks has brought out a revamped Hyperion 2, which for me at least takes the place of last year's Hyperion Max. And as I already said, Brooks has entered a very competitive space. However, up until now, they didn't have anything in that space. So it makes sense that they filled it with a Hyperion Max 2. So the Hyperion Max 2 is going to suit the sort of runner who likes a plated shoe. And by that, I mean it's just a fairly stable ride for a neutral shoe, and it does provide that little extra pop. It's a very pleasant ride. I am definitely a fan of those plated shoes that are just slightly more flexible. So you're getting a little extra oomph without getting that plate fatigue that we can sometimes get when we're running in a shoe with a very stiff carbon fiber plate. Now the Hyperion Max 2 definitely wants to run fast. In fact, when you start to pick up the pace, the shoe really does come alive, but it feels equally at home at slower paces. So even though this is going to be marketed towards those up-tempo paces, you know, kind of like the training partner to the Hyperion Elite 4, I think this would also work fairly well for someone that is looking for a daily trainer that they can use for a lot of paces. That is if you tolerate a fairly rigid shoe. And again, this shoe isn't totally rigid, but it's certainly not like a unplated shoe. As far as all-around comfort goes, I think Brooks has really knocked it out of the park. I don't know if you've seen my review of the Hyperion 2 already. If not, I'll place links in the show notes below. But with the Hyperion 2 and now the Hyperion Max 2, I think Brooks has done something pretty special with these two releases. And because I mentioned those other competitors a little earlier in the video, you could be wondering which shoe does the Hyperion Max 2 closestly resemble? And I'm going to say it most likely resembles, at least in feel, on the run, the Hoka Mark X. That's what came to mind when I was running in the Hyperion Max 2. But with that said, the Hyperion Max 2 is definitely a little snappier than the Mark X. Now it's your turn. I want to hear from you. Do you think Brooks did a good thing by changing the Hyperion Max into its current iteration? And are you considering picking up a pair? Let me know in the comments. And with that, it's Matt B. This has been my review of the Brooks Hyperion Max 2. Be kind, be happy, run well. See you in a couple of days.